Over the last few weeks, I have been hearing a little person running around the house when I'm home alone. Things sound like they are moving or crashing in the other rooms, but when I check, it's all normal. Laughter of a child in the house when I was alone and no one was on the playground. Then this week, I saw it. It stayed just outside my peripheral as I turned to look at the sound of a small person running. It was a small thing, like a child, but maybe 3 or 4. It ran past. I heard it run down the hall towards the bedroom, and that was that. Now, ghosts have never scared me. Even violent ones never bother me. But I do take offense to my youngest child, 6, waking up scared at night due to something he heard or bad dreams. Leave my kid out of it, ghost. He is not your playmate. Last night, my son woke us up. He had a dream that something grabbed him and he came to our room scared. I asked my husband what time it was and he said 3 a.m. I then get up and my phone says exactly 3 a.m. I use the light on my phone to get dressed and check on hubby and son. I decide to just start working. I'm working from home at the moment. And I look back at my phone and it still says 3 a.m. I know more than a few minutes have passed. I open my laptop and it says 3:07 a.m. I look at my phone, which is still stuck at 3 a.m. and shut it off and on. Only then does the time update. Bad enough the poor thing is scaring my son, but so strange my phone was stuck at 3 a.m. for 7 minutes. Odd. My husband has seen a shadow run into the boys' room as well, and thought it was the boys. But when he checked, they were both in the living room and no one had been near the bedrooms. So it's not just me seeing or hearing it. If it keeps waking up my son, what can I do to make it go? If it was just me, I wouldn't bother with it as they leave me alone. But it's after my baby, and it does not feel friendly. A few friends of mine were into exploring abandoned places and checking locations out. Whether it's a run-down shack in the middle of nowhere or an abandoned building, we were always eager to take a look around. We don't vandalize or destroy property, we only take a look. One day, I find out that one of the cemeteries in my area is apparently haunted. It borders an old abandoned mental hospital, and the cemetery was the burial ground for some of the unfortunates who died at that place. The asylum is 150 years old, and it was a horrible place for those who were housed there. All up, there were 4 of us. After 20 minutes of driving, we get out and search for the cemetery. After about 10 to 15 minutes of looking on maps and walking up and down the neighborhood, we finally came across the cemetery's entrance. It was around 11 p.m. when we go into the cemetery. It was very quiet, barely any cars on the street, and all I could hear was the distant dogs yapping about. All 4 of us start heading into the cemetery. We're taking this slow and using our eyes and ears to catch anything suspicious. As we're walking, I hear a faint laugh coming from the trees below. It sounded like a child. I first wrote it off as a dog barking in the distance, or just something explainable. As we continue down the track further, I hear the child laughter again. I turn to my friend who turns to me, and we both just stare at each other. We both heard the same thing coming from the woods below, and were just spooked. But that didn't stop us. We pushed on, going further into the cemetery and towards the trees. We eventually ended up getting too scared and decided to turn around and walk back. I was positioned with another friend of mine about 2 meters behind my other buddies. All of a sudden, I can hear heavy footsteps walking towards us to our right. I'm not kidding when I say this, but these footsteps just started picking up pace and we could hear these loud thumping footsteps just galloping at us. We panicked like crazy because we're looking directly at this sound and there's nobody there. It was too loud to be some sort of critter, and it definitely wasn't another person. I am now 18, and I no longer urban explore places as it's too risky and I can risk heavy fines. I'm quite a skeptic, and I am all ears for any logical explanation. I was 3 or 4 years old, all the way in Vermont, spending Christmas with my great aunt Rose. She took me and my baby sister, who was likely only 1 at the time, to a little spot where they provided sleigh rides for the occasion. It had gotten dark and we had partied most of the day, until the sleighs took us to our last stop, which was this little diner/gift shop, I think. Tiny baby me decided I could wander off and sit at one of the tables while I waited for my aunt, who was carrying my little sister, to stop talking to her friends. In front of me on the table was a painted checkers board, and to the side a box of red and black checkers. Suddenly, there was a man sitting across from me. I don't remember how old he looked, but he was blonde and pale. He introduced himself as my cousin Ian, Aunt Rosa's child. He said he would teach me how to play checkers, and I excitedly accepted. He won the first game, but I won the second one. After I won, I think he said something about needing to leave, and before I knew it, he was gone. I got up and ran to my Aunt Rose, smiling, telling her I'd just won my first game of checkers. She asked me, "Rabbit, who did you play with?" I told her it was my cousin Ian, of course. She looked at me bewildered. I told her he was a tall, blonde boy who said she was his mom. Then I found out that Ian had died of a heart attack, less than before I was born. Every night, after finishing my freelancing job, I sleep late, like 4 a.m. or even early morning sometimes. But today, I finally got off from my work early and I'm trying to sleep. But there's this constant sound of walking. I checked twice, there's no one in the house. My mom and dad are sleeping soundly. But I'm hearing these sounds like the sound when you walk bare feet on marble or concrete floor. Those sounds are not my imagination, I promise. I can clearly hear them. They get closer and even further away sometimes. They sounded exactly like walking barefoot, but with a little pressure. The thing is, I know I'm hearing them, but I can't find a possible explanation. But that's not all. The real thing that took away my sleep is the fact that it seems to come closer, and it looks like it stopped right outside my room. For a minute, I was scared. Then I thought about my mom and dad and thought they could be in trouble if it's an intruder. So I went and checked, but there was no one. So this was one of the first times I ever was truly scared by something paranormal. I was 14 at the time, and my father and I had just started buying guns as I took an interest in shooting. We got an M44 Mosin Nagant made in 1953 in Poland. For those who do not know much about old guns, the Mosin Nagant is the battle rifle of Russia from pre-World War I and to the end of World War II. And the M44 designation is for a shortened rifle version with a bayonet that can be folded out. So we had the rifle for a while. I had shot it and everything before this event occurred. I had researched the marks of the rifle, which is why I knew where it was made and all the little details of the gun. Me being a curious history lover, I love learning anything I can about items I have. It was months since getting it. The initial thrill of getting a gun had long since worn off, and so really other than hoping to go shooting sometime soon, it was not on my mind when I went to bed. The reason I mention this is just that it's not assumed I am just overly imaginative, and after getting an old military gun, I just imagined all this. Anyway, the rifle was at this point the only real gun we had, besides our few 22 caliber rifles, for plinking, and they were stored in my closet. So anyway, for the actual experience, I went to bed. It was during a break, so no school, which is great because of what unfolded. I didn't sleep much. I was asleep when I woke up in the middle of the night at 2 a.m. for no reason. I looked to my closet near my bed, and the door was open, which it was never this open normally, though I never really shut the door. When looking into the closet, it was like I saw something. I walked literally into the closet that was not my closet. I can only describe it as if I was transported by the closet to a different place, which was also nighttime, and I can see ahead of me what seems to be a watchtower. I too was in a watchtower. A fence was near the watchtowers and then another further away from it. I'm then alerted to a figure moving near the fence, and I raised my Mosin Nagants and fired off a round, which caused a horrible scream. Chambered the next round, and fired again, which ceased the memory. I'm standing in my closet now, truly my closet. Nothing happened really in this change. It's like having some hologram disappear and reveal my real surroundings or something. The feeling though is as if I was pulled back. It's hard to describe. With this, I left my closet and sat down in bed, wondering what the actual fuck happened. But I did end up falling back asleep, and the next morning, I woke up early, 8 a.m. or so, which is abnormal for me as I'm more of a 10 a.m. person. Don't judge me, I'm just not a morning person unless I must be. As I woke up, I looked to my closet and saw a dark figure peeking out of it. I didn't even scream. I let out a squeak of fear. I wasn't even thinking of last night. I just felt there was someone that broke into my house and was looking at me, even though there was no reason he would be a dark shadow, instead of a detailed human being, as my room was very well lit by now. But yet, nothing was there. The next night, I woke up at 2 a.m. to find a dark shadow once more looking at me from my closet. I will overstate the obvious. It was pitch black night, and I'm seeing a shadow figure, yes. This sounds absolutely absurd because black on black doesn't really show itself. I'm a long-time drama club kid, and I know this, which is why this freaks me out still. Yet, I saw this figure. A dark figure as clear as the one I saw before. I immediately bolted for my parents' room, screaming my lungs out as I ran. I explained in a sheer panic how there was a person in my closet and that someone was in the house. But once we're back in my room, nothing. This repeated the following night. The only difference is the figure was outside of the closet now, and the same effect, I ran screaming. The following night, the same thing, but now it's looking down at me from next to my bed, and again, I ran fleeing. By this point, something connected for me. And I also demanded the rifle be moved from my closet, and it was placed in my parents' bedroom. With this, it ceased. All of it. Since then, I refuse to ever have the gun in my bedroom when I sleep, and it remains locked away in a gun safe we now have. Now, I'm a pretty skeptical person, more so today than I was then. With that, I'm very much aware of sleep paralysis and all of those things. That makes no sense here, as none of the times was I unable to move. I was able to get up and move to the closet, and get up and flee screaming like a madman. An atheist, non-believing friend I told actually referenced some gulag pictures which matched my dream extremely closely, which freaked me out as I had never even really heard of a gulag. Yet when I had the experience, and I had never researched them before. More so is the fact that gulags shouldn't explain it, as they were not a Polish thing, but a Stalinist thing which ended with his death in 1953. Everything in my mind wants to explain this way, but yet nothing explains why this happens. I don't disbelieve in the paranormal. Even as a skeptic, I do believe stuff can happen, and I can only reach the conclusion that I saw something that once happened, but to who, why, and where, I truly don't know. I put this as debunk this simply because honestly, I would love to believe it was not real and have someone explain it away, because the thought that someone is attached to this gun is tragic. My mom has told me before that when I was about 3, me and her and my dad were driving through Arizona or New Mexico on our way to Albuquerque to see family. The car was almost out of gas, and this was before smartphones. It was in 2003. We were in a town that we'd never stopped in before, but apparently I gave my parents directions down a weird dirt road and didn't look like it went anywhere, but that led right to a small gas station, hidden from the main road, no signs or anything. I'm surprised they listened to a 3-year-old, to be honest, especially when you can't waste gas on a child's whim. So I must have sounded really certain or something. I'll ask them about it again soon, actually. Anyway, they filled up and we continued driving, and they were weirded out but decided to forget about it. As far as explanations, either I lived in that town in a past life, or I had a psychic ability as a child, or my parents are morons and it was clearly visible and only I saw it. Unfortunately, my parents are not morons at all, so I don't think it's that one. Also, it's worth noting that I haven't done anything exactly like that since, but I do have really strong intuition about when it's time to leave a place or which direction to go into to get help, for example. Anyway, yeah, that's it. So, maybe a week ago, at my friend's suggestion, I asked my spirit guides for guidance. If you believe in that sort of thing, or any of this, bear with me. An owl landed on top of the flagpole in my yard last night. I spend a lot of time in my car smoking cigarettes and listening to music, so that's why I was out there. So after that, I subconsciously started directing my prayers to the top of the flagpole. Keep in mind, there's no flag on it, just a knob of some sort in an odd shape, like a bird almost. I don't think this knob is anything itself. But here's the thing. One night, while looking at it, I realised it was shifting. The dark silhouette of it looked like it was subtly changing and moving, like the way a flame behaves almost. But it's dark, because it's a silhouette at night. I realised that this shifting shadow type energy is something I've seen before, and that scared me. I was worried because it looks like shadow people, the way their silhouette shifts. But for some reason, I decided to talk to it. Now, I know I might sound crazy at this point, but there's more. I talk to it a lot and it can't really respond, but it did tell me its name is Tether. That's one of the only things I was able to understand from it. Yeah, I know. Kind of a creepy name. That seemed like a red flag to me too. But the owl landed there, so I figured it must be the same thing. Or they're connected? I've been sharing my problems with Tether and asking him to help me. I made it clear that he's not allowed inside the house, and that in return for being chill with me, I dedicate tobacco burnings to him. Cigarettes. Some Native American tribes used to burn tobacco to spirits, for reference, and I am half Native American. Anyway, everything was fine, but I noticed the other night the gate was wide open. Creepy. And then tonight, the passenger seat of my car was fully reclined. I told Tether not to move things anymore because it makes me uncomfortable. That was a couple hours ago. I've talked to my friends about this because she sees stuff too. And she said shadow isn't always bad. It might just be the only way to perceive it. She called it a gnome or a fairy. That's why I've been treating it like an acquaintance. But I can't help wonder if it's something else. Does anyone have any insight on this? And don't just be alarmist and jump to the worst case scenario, please. Like, don't say something if you don't know what you're talking about. But I do want to hear your thoughts if you've experienced anything like this. So the night before, I kept waking up in 3-ish hour intervals and had strong dreams each time. The last time I went to sleep, which was probably 3 to 4 am, I assume I was asleep, but I heard a conversation about me, like people were in the room with me. A woman said something about giving me many chances during 1783 and long before that year. After saying that, I felt something nibble and lick me from my lower stomach on down, and I woke up. I would normally just forget about something like this because it was very strange, and maybe my mind was going nuts. The voice sounded so real, and I felt real touch on my body. I also have no interest in anything sexual, or even love in that way. Personally, it isn't for me right now, and I don't have trouble being without it. Last night, I felt uncomfortable again before going to sleep, but only woke up once around 3:30 before going back to bed. I don't know where this feeling is coming from, but I've done everything I could do to be comfortable with no resultant change. When I went back to sleep, I had a dream, well, to put it short, some kind of partly exclusive to a woman that ended in an orgy. I ended up leaving this area because I wanted to wake up from this place, but I felt stunned all of a sudden and began to wake up. As I wake up, I feel someone on top of me with their tongue in my mouth, and I'm holding them. I tried to open my eyes as quickly as I'm panicking for good reason. Nothing was there. I know this might be an inappropriate story, and I'm not overthinking it. It's just something I can't get out of my head. It all felt very real, and I'm unsure how to feel, let alone express anything. It's also a rather embarrassing thing to talk about, especially when such things are never on my mind. Whether more medical, psychological, or paranormal answers. Hello, I'm a 34-year-old French guy. I've been thinking a lot about my youth recently, and I've noticed a few weird things happened when I was living at my parents'. I'm usually not fond of weird or paranormal things, but the more I think of it, the more it's weird. I want to talk about it, but I don't feel comfortable doing it with my friends. All the follow happened in Le Havre, in France, where I was born. In the apartment my parents lived in before I was born and until they both moved away. The first thing I recall is that one night, I was around 6 or 7 years old, I heard noise from the kitchen. It was loud. I went there and my mom was there. We had 5 or 6 pans of different sizes hanged above the oven. They were all moving and making noise, hitting each other. My mom told me to go to bed. I wasn't very scared at this time, just half asleep and wondering what was happening. But then, maybe some weeks or a few months later, this happened again. The sound wasn't chaotic, but more like bells, like on top of churches. This time, I was scared like shit and insist not get up. I remember that after my dad changed some furniture in the kitchen, and the pans were inside each other on the counter next to the sink, and not hanged anymore. The next ones are very cliche. They happened when I was 9, my sister was 6. She had a baby doll that could walk on his 4, move its head, and make baby laughs, with batteries in it. We stored our toys in a box shaped like a chest, in each one's room. One night, I hear my mom scream. I came to see, and the baby doll was in the middle of the hallway, walking without sound and without its head. Mom rushed to it, removed the batteries, and told me to go to bed. The morning after, she threw away the doll, and its head, which was in the toy box, saying it's broken. My sister was sad because they was not awoken by what happened the previous night, and didn't understand. In the same fashion, she had a big dog plush, as big as me. She used as a seat in her room. Many times that dog plush was found, in the morning, in the living room. My sister said it was not her who moved it. I believed her. The plush was bigger than her. At a point, my dad threw it away, saying it was dirty and couldn't be washed. Then this happened when I was around 11 or 12, I think. My sister and I were playing Pokemon cards on the floor in my room, the real card game, when suddenly a large furniture that was next to us fell on us. I moved quick enough to hold it before it fell, and my sister rushed to ask help from our dad. He was pissed and accused us. We told him we were just playing cards. That furniture was moved in the living room, not long ago. That's how I ended up having the computer in my room, because they switched that big furniture with the computer desk. A thing that was disturbing, both my parents were smokers, and so was my sister and I when we reached 15 or 16. In the living room we used to smoke, so after some years the walls turned yellowish, so my dad washed them and painted them white again. But there was a spot which never turned yellow, right in the middle of a wall. It wasn't pure white, but you could see the difference. For this one, I was older, maybe 16 or 17. During the nights, my TV switched on by itself, so that's a French thing. On Channel 6 on Fridays, there was a series like Buffy, Charmed, X-Files, and then there were adult series like Sex and the City or Ally McBeal. After that, during the night, there was music videos, usually alternative musical metal. I switched off the TV after watching Sex and the City, fell asleep, and the TV switched back on by itself during a weird music video clip with a girl crucified. It scared me a lot. I jumped out of bed and unplugged the TV. After that, I unplugged the TV every night. I left that apartment when I was 19 years old to move in with my now ex-boyfriend. My sister did the same 2 years after me. My family didn't end well after that, and I swear this is true. My mom was diagnosed with cancer short term after I left. She was cured, but got another one right after that. She decided to divorce to live alone and not be a burden to my dad. She left, and 2 years after that committed suicide because she was diagnosed with another cancer and she was too tired to fight. My father was still living in the apartment. Even though my parents divorced, they were still very close. 1 year after my mom passed away, my father tried to do the same with pills and alcohol, but I found him asleep on the kitchen table, called 112, the French 911, and he was saved. He's alive, but suffers from failures in his brain, and is in a state where he can't live alone, work, or even remember anything. So he's in a special medical place where people take care of him, and people like him. He stayed some weeks in the hospital before moving to that place. During that time, I usually went to his apartment to clean the mess and to bring him stuff like clothes and all. When he moved to the medical place, I came home to take the last stuff he needed to move out, and the ceiling of the kitchen collapsed at the exact same place I found my father sleeping. It was a shock, because it was the place he spent the most time watching TV, drinking coffee or wine. My boyfriend was with me, so he picked up the stuff needed. We left and never came back. We paid a company to remove the furniture, and insurance dealt with the damages. I already cut ties with my sister, who became homophobic with time. Broke up with my boyfriend not long after that, not related at all, and moved to Paris. So I was sleeping in my bed a few years ago. I live up in the mountains by the border of a national forest. I was home alone all summer, and I would sleep a lot of the days away up there in the quiet mountains of a small, unincorporated neighborhood. So one day, I had a very vivid dream. Sometimes I would get sleep paralysis where I would see shadow beings standing by my bed trying to attack me. But this time, standing by my bed was a regular man. His style looked as if he was from the 1970s. He was a regular looking man, maybe in his mid-20s. An African American man who was wearing a red t-shirt and blue jeans. In my dream, he was standing by my bedside table talking to me. I could make out what he was saying as he pointed up to the top shelf of my closet. From his mouth came the words, "You might want to get rid of that voodoo," pointing. I immediately woke up and wanted to see if it was just a dream. I stood up to look to see what he was pointing in my closet. I wanted to know once and for all if it was all in my head or if there was truth to the paranormal world. Searching in the back of my closet where he had pointed at first, I found nothing because I had never used that top shelf since moving in the home. But reaching behind the shelf, I found something hidden intentionally behind the middle plank of the shelf wood. And I pulled out a rolled up scroll of paper, and out of it fell a lock of braided golden hair. The rolled up paper had something written on it with a very faint pencil in another language of cursive writing that I couldn't quite read, and strange symbols. I had finally found physical, tangible proof of the paranormal realm. Meaning I had indeed just contacted a spirit, and this wasn't just a dream. After some research, I found out this braided lock of hair hidden in the home is what is called a witch's ladder, and is indeed black magic. This African American spirit had revealed to me that voodoo is a real power in our universe, and this had such profound implications. It changed the way I look at the world. The spirit said one more thing before leaving. He told me that the heavy metal t-shirts and posters I had in my room had evil power to them. And his final message before leaving was, "Jesus is King." And he told me to keep playing the guitar. As he left, he morphed into a spirit animal like a black panther of gemstones. As for the lock of hair, unfortunately, I put it in a Ziploc bag. I wanted to study its power. I finally have proof of the paranormal realm. I couldn't just throw it away. I wanted to see if I can take it to a laboratory to be studied, and if it radiates any strange electromagnetic fields. Imagine if we could actually measure black magic. That would be the greatest rediscovery of our time. This could be the ultimate secret weapon used against mankind, especially from high sorcerers or witchcraft practitioners in government and corporations. I moved to my current address just a few months ago, and as my family and I were moving in, our upstairs neighbour told us that the house is fairly active for paranormal activity. I didn't really know what to think. I don't consider myself a skeptic or a believer, but there are truly no explanations for the things I've experienced. The first big experience I had in the house was a few days after we started moving in. We were only moving from another city over, so we decided to kind of take our time with the move. My mom and brother had taken the U-Haul back to the apartment to load up belongings while I stayed behind and started to move the boxes into rooms. I was moving boxes from the living room into the kitchen, and when I looked up to look out the window, I found a man in an old black suit and hat walking down the sidewalk to the backyard. He didn't look at me, he just walked straight back. I thought at first that he was possibly the property manager or owner. I opened up the back door to go and meet him, but he had disappeared. That was before the neighbour warned me. He told me that the malicious activity mostly takes place in the basement. Snarls, thrown rocks, scratches. I've only experienced knocking sounds and weird shadows, and his son's bedroom upstairs. He told me his son was dragged out of bed by the ankles. Most of what I've experienced has been in the kitchen. I often hear people walking upstairs in areas that have since been boarded up. There's a staircase that the owners boarded up and turned into a pantry. Stuff is constantly getting knocked off countertops and thrown to the floor. I was also grabbed once when sweeping the floor. I haven't really given it any attention or tried to contact or communicate because it hasn't really impacted me. A lot of it I just thought was weird and figured it's an old house. Old houses do weird things. Last night was completely different. It was around 2 to 2:30 in the morning. I was in bed, trying my best to sleep, when I heard something in the living room or kitchen make the weirdest noise I've ever heard in my life. It sounded like a man yelling, trying to mimic a cat in heat. It wasn't my cat. He's nurtured and was asleep by my feet. I mentioned mimicry in the title because sometimes my cat makes yowling noises when he's out in the kitchen. He really likes the way his meowing and carrying on echoes back to him. This was not that sound. It was not a cat outside. I have the windows closed and the air conditioning on. This sound was definitely inside the house. I have no idea what could have made this noise other than something supernatural. It scared the hell out of me, and I haven't been able to stop thinking about it. I'm kind of concerned. I don't know if I should truly be concerned. Is this a sign that whatever entities are in the house are getting bolder? Are they trying to target my cat? I'd love to hear if you have any ideas on what it could be, or if you've experienced similar things, especially what happened after. When I was 17, my friend George was attacked by something supernatural right in front of me. My friends and I were very intrigued by Ouija boards towards the end of high school. We spent several nights over a few months cramming together and hovering over a planchette. We had a variety of experiences using the Ouija board, most of which you could describe as mildly supernatural, or just a plain old coincidence. One of the places we would frequent was the garage in George's family home. Like most garages, it was dark, damp, and cluttered. George was as intrigued by the Ouija board as we all were. That is, until it started to target George. Over the course of different sittings, we would ask it all kinds of questions like who it was, what it wanted, how many fingers are behind my back. We still weren't convinced it was legit. We had the spirit tell us who they were, and when prompted for what they wanted, they replied, "Kill George." Needless to say, George was spooked, but in order to save face, he persevered. A sitting following that, we had asked the same questions. As the conversation developed, a now different spirit had changed its mind and decided it was the previous spirit, and that it still wanted to kill George. This, paired with several events that George had experienced himself in the nights that followed, had driven George away from our little seances. We, however, were still more than happy to tinker around, and were not satisfied yet. On the last night we played with the Ouija board, we set up in George's garage as we usually did. He said that he had no problem with us using it in his garage, and in his presence. He just didn't want to participate. That night, it was just George, 2 girls, and I. We turned out the lights and set up the board. We even lit a candle, or 2 for good effect. George and 1 girl sat across from the other girl and I. We were all in coats because it was winter and the garage was poorly insulated. The 3 of us, with our hands on the planchette, had barely even begun when George's coat arm caught on fire. I remember him watching him fling his arm around as he tried to smother the flame. I immediately jumped up and turned on the lights. It didn't take long for George to put out the flame. We quickly pile out of the garage into his basement and after a few moments of panic and confusion, we divert our attention towards George. He took off his coat and swore his arm was fine. There wasn't a single mark on his skin. Then we diverted our attention to the newly charred coat arm. The burn was about the radius of a fist, and it burned deeply through the layers, just shy of the inner layer of cloth. The most startling part was that it was undeniably the shape of a goat's hoof. We hid the coat away for several days. Once we gained the courage, George and I pulled it back out in an attempt to debunk our little experience. After all, there were open flames in the room, and we had a cigarette in his hand. We applied a cigarette directly onto the opposite coat arm several times. We took a lighter to it in another attempt to simulate the same kind of flame. No matter what we tried, we couldn't come close to recreating the hoof-like burn. Over time, I thought that maybe George had decided to stage the whole thing in an effort to deter us from the Ouija board. He certainly had motive. That was 10 years ago. George and I are still great friends. Occasionally, I get confident that I can get him to fess up, and I press him on the subject. It's been 10 years, and he still has the same response. That he loved that coat, and he was just as surprised and terrified as we were. Personally, I don't believe he staged it. I believe that what we experienced was authentic. My perspective on life has never been the same since.